Okay, so in the last video we were very busy building the API, and this one is going to be about we're going to just take a step away from the API side and get into the Rust smart contract, specifically the guest smart contract, where we were able to create the guests and have a balance for the account and that sort of stuff. So what we're planning on doing now is giving our guest the ability to send near and receive near from different accounts. So let's get started. So once we're able to send and receive near from users, that is guests or actual test net or mainnet users, what we will do is we will implement sending NFTs between these users and also sending fungible token. The way it's going to work is slightly different from what we normally do when it involves sending near token or NFTs or fungible tokens, but we'll just expose the methods on this particular smart contract so that the mobile app knows how to actually call this stuff. So most of these transfers are anyway initiated by the mobile application. So if it's we can't use a standard methods just because these accounts don't actually exist. They exist in theory on the guest smart contract. So we just have to expose some methods on the smart contract to be able to basically act as if a transaction is actually taking place between the two accounts, whether it's if it's the whether it's guest to guest account or guest to a near account and near to guest account, that sort of stuff. So anyway, I talked a lot. So I'm just gonna get started by basically just refreshing my own memory on what this contract is supposed to do, and just I'll talk it out. I'll kind of explain the different methods, and then from there we'll start putting in basically making the changes that we need to make for the transfer of near. All right, with that long-winded explanation out of the way, we've got a couple of so basically this add guest method is what we have been using so far in the from the mobile app side, where the users will basically select their username and then we generate the public key and private key on the user's device, and then from then onwards we just make an API call requesting to add this guest, and if the account doesn't already exist, well, there's only one, we don't need to get too much into the nitty-gritty, but if the account doesn't exist, then we create a guest account for the user, and then we have a get guest method as well. So before we can send and receive funds, it's great that we already have an accounts key storage here. It's just a map between the account ID and then the balance. So obviously the account ID is the actual account ID that's passed in here. So if we want to take a look at, just give me a second. If you want to take a look at the smart contract, just try and find it on my computer. All right. So this, I believe, was right. So this is the smart contract. It's a dev account, so it's just like a throwaway smart contract address. But as you can see, it has a handful of add guest calls that are happening. So let's just go into here and then take a quick look at the data that's being passed into it. It's not here. Looks like maybe it's in the other tab. Awesome. So it's just the account ID. and that's the Alice account dot guest dot dev right? So we can ask for the so basically this accounts table has a map of the account ID and the corresponding balance. So what we want to do is let's go ahead and add a method here called you know what, maybe we should add some tests. That's probably the best way to kind of go about this. So I believe this is the annotation that we need for the test, and what we'll say is get account balance. Sorry. Actually, we don't have any tests right now. We probably should add some tests for get guest and add guest, but we won't do that right now. We don't want to get distracted from what we're trying to do. Basically, what I want to do is have a method to get the current balance of an account. This is the near token balance. Get account balance. And don't think it returns anything. Just need to refresh my own memory on how some tests are written in the smart contract world. So just give me a second. I'm gonna look at some of my other examples. All right. So we're going to bring in our context from here. Get the context, and that is there's no input and it's not a view. We then want to make sure that context dot trying to remember what it is. Right. We also want to create a contract. That mutable contract equals. There's no new, right? There is the guest contract. Guess we can create a new contract. That is interesting. Yeah, I guess I do have this one. And then what we want to do is fix the error that we have here. The storage key was supposed to be accounts, and we had made a mistake before, but that's okay. I'm fairly certain we have to redeploy the entire contract, but it's not a problem. Okay, so contract accounts the default. Trying to think why it is. Oh, we can't do that. Okay. So, okay, so it looks like what we have may not be ideal. Let's just uncomment this init portion. And what we will do is we will implement default for the contract. Oh, we do have that. Let me think about this for a second. We were using this new because we wanted to initialize the contract. But because we did that, state exists, then contract is already initialized. Right. So what I think, I just need to spend a second to kind of understand what's the best way to creating a pending contract, which is fine. What if I say that this is a guess? Will that let me do that? No, it doesn't. It expects right, let's get rid of that. So the reason why I don't want to use default is because I don't want people to use well, I guess that's fine. I don't want to. You know what I can do? I can right. I want this to be called. The ID is always the predecessor account ID. I wonder if we can still do that with default. So we probably cannot. So we have self. We don't want to panic anymore. What we want to do is we want to return self with the storage usage, which is nothing. Actually, we're not using storage usage, so I'm going to get rid of this property. And we don't need this. We can get rid of this one as well. So the owner ID may be required, correct? Yeah, it is. So let's see, owner ID is predecessor account ID, and then guess are set to a cup map new with storage key prefix. Oh, basically here. we have the guest storage key prefix, and then the accounts are also doing the same thing over there. Okay, so we have the default, so we no longer need the new, and we can scroll over here and then just use the, well, let me do that one more. Contract. I might guest. Where is the guest contract coming from then? Yeah, this. The default. Okay. Yeah, for some reason it was thought that guest contracts exist, but anyway, okay, now that we have the contract created, we can actually seed this contract with we'll basically insert into here a bob.testnet and a value which is 100. Then what we want to do is say contracts.get account here, and then pass in the account name. So before we do that, let's just make this pass in the account name, and we are expecting to see an amount, and we can assert that this amount is the same as the account amount, and that is coming from here. Otherwise, you can say account not the same. Cool. So now that we have contract, yeah. Then we need to create a string from, and okay, so that's good. This method doesn't exist. Get account near does not exist, and we want to do an equate test here. So what we can do is now make sure we have the function implemented. Function self account ID, and then we want to return a U128, which is basically balance. Yep, and then we can say let account equals self dot accounts dot get, sorry, account ID, and then we can expect that it exists. Otherwise we can I have an error message, which is account does not exist, and then we can return account dot well, we are getting back balance, right? So we're going to return the balance, and the balance is always stored in near. So what we can do is we can run our test. And it looks like one of the tests have failed. Blockchain interface has not been set. It looks like it's not related to our test, but more related to the test framework. So let's see. I believe we are supposed to call this method testing environment, and then we can run our test again. Oh, so it looks like we're able to pass the test, which means that getting the account balance works. So let's add a new function. Test. What we will do is first we want to see if we can send there from native account to guest account, and then we want to also test for send near from guest account to another guest account. But for the sake of I do want guest accounts to be created very quickly, but we don't want people to transfer near out of the guest account into a near account. Sorry, I lost my train of thought for a second. We want to make things easy for guest accounts to be created so that people can start chatting away. But if anybody can create an account, potentially scammers can create accounts as well. So while it is fine for near to be sent into a guest account, we don't necessarily want to implement a way for near to be sent away from the guest account just yet, because we need to think a little bit about or actually what we can do is we can make sure that the account balance is hard limited to 0.1 near, because this allows this account owner to go ahead and create an actual near account, and that prevents scammers from basically creating a near guest account on here, scamming away at people and getting a bunch of funds sent over to them. So an account for now can have a maximum balance of 0.1 near. That would be a reasonable assumption. That also poses different challenges when we want to implement sending fungible tokens between users. But we'll get to that. We'll think about that a little bit. I'm really like shooting from the hip when I'm doing this, because I haven't really spent a lot of time preparing. I just kind of jump into this, so I get stuck often and try to figure it out on the fly. So it's not always like the smoothest experiences, but for people that are watching, but it is what it is. So you want to be able to send near from the guest account to a guest account. Yeah, and that's also fine because any guest account can only have a maximum of 0.1 near. So if I really don't want that 0.1 near, I can just go ahead and send it to that other guest account. Okay. Next thing is we want to send near from native account to the guest account. Right, I just copied over this code, which I don't really want to do, so I'm going to do this. Just kind of scaffold it. And also while writing tests, it's really good to think about it in this format, which is the AAA format, right? Which is arrange, act, and then assert. That means we're arranging our test data first. We're going to start making method calls, and then finally we'll start asserting, which is kind of what we did over here as well. So all of this is arrange. This step is act, and then this one is assert. You can argue that this is also act, but this is act, and then we're just basically asserting. So that's a great way to kind of start thinking about writing tests. Okay, so I want to be able to send near from near guest account to another guest account, which is fine. And you could also send near from guest account to a non-native account. For now, I think it's fine because we're dealing with like relatively small numbers, 0.1 near maximum. So, all right. In the context, we want to make sure that there is an attached deposit of 0.1 near. And so we're gonna write a small util RS file, and what this is going to do is have a function for us near to Yocto. And that is going to return a balance. It's going to accept a balance and return the Yocto as a balance. And that's basically near amount times 10 to the power of 24, not 28. And for us to be able to use balance, we need to import, we don't import something, use near SDK balance is what we need to do. And I'm looking over here because it's just my notes. I wrote another smart contract that had this method, so I'm just gonna try not to Google search and try to figure it out if I already figured it out before. So, and what we want to do is we want to use create and then you want to use mod create, util. So I believe that, well, if you don't have this, you can still, right, dash deposit is in, and the near amount is 0.1. Cool. So now that we have our deposit, you can convert that into U128. So that's one near, and we can divide that do a division 10, I believe, and then you're going to get 0.1 near, hopefully. And then we want to be able to call the method contract dot transfer near, and then context dot predecessor account ID. Signer account. Predecessor account is the account that called. It's the same as the signer account. Okay, that's good. So it's basically bob.testnet. So we're doing a transfer of near to the account ID, and we want to make sure that if we ask for the account balance, which is right here, that is the same as assert that is near to Yocto. Near is the same as the attached deposit. Then we're good. Otherwise, we want to type in an exact amount was not transferred. Cool. And it looks like we don't have a transfer near function. Right. And there is no account here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up the account as well. Chat. Okay, so that is our transferring near. So that's good. So one thing we want to make sure that is that we seed this account into the contract. So the assumption is that we would have already added this account as a guest, and yeah, so that's right. So far, looks like I can just add guest instead of yeah. So let's just do that. Contract dot. Oh, that's the wrong function. Dot add guest. The account ID is. Yeah, that's fine. I'll just change this to account ID, and then the public key is, I don't know, what is this public key? Just gonna create a random public key, hopefully, if it lets me. I'm not sure if that'll work, but I'm just going to try it. Unexpected. Oh, yeah, it looks like we can't actually do that. From 14 implementations. Okay. So we can convert it from rec. You can do that from string as well. Oh, okay. Yeah, let's give it a shot. So we can actually copy this public key over to this one, and what we will do is we'll say get me from does that okay, doesn't let me do it, that's fine. So what we'll do is we'll convert it to a string using string from. Oh man, still not happy about it. Okay, what's the problem? Let's leave the error message. Scroll. Yeah, so that's what I want to do. So from yeah, I guess I can do try from, and then we can ask it to string from, and then pass in this thing. And what we can do as the end is unwrap. Okay, so far, okay, that's happy. Okay, that's great. That's all I really care about. Okay, so let's just okay. So let's format it a little bit so it's easy to see, kind of. So we want to transfer near to this account, and what we can do is also add another test. Should not allow transferring near to an account if the balance is going to be greater than 0.1. Oh my god, 0.1 near. Okay. Alright. So let's go ahead and implement the transfer near method. So we want to return the balance of the account after the transfer succeeded. Usually, the typical use case is I have a guest account and someone wants to seed my account 0.1, so I have the necessary funds to create my own near wallet. So maybe someone has 0.1, maybe someone wants to just give me 0.01, so I have to test 10 people for that 0.1 until I have a 0.1 near to create the wallet. So it doesn't really matter. We just want to return back the current balance after the account has been created. So balance after, well actually no, I don't want to implement this feature without actually writing the test first. So transfer near. Just give me 1 second. All right, I'm back. All right. So transfer mirror into this account. How do we know how many funds to get? That comes from an attached deposit, and then amount. So we also want to make sure that the account exists, and that is the same as this one. Suppose we could just call this method can. Or the account ID, but we need to make a modification, so that has to be a mutable self. There we go. Okay, and we want to self dot counts dot insert. Insert count ID, and the value is balance plus amount. That's the account ID, and then the balance plus amount is a little bit okay. Your balance is over here. And the cool thing about U128 is we don't actually have to add like this. We could just do checked add. It's very, very rare for us to run into overflow because we're dealing with much like really low value numbers. But it's a good practice to go ahead and use this checked add. So the balance exists, and what we can do is we just basically expect it to exist. Oh, okay. So then we do unwrap. We expect this to enable increase funds, and then we have our balance, and then that's going to be the new balance on this account. We want to send it this way. It's so what's the problem here? I see, so the value moved here. So it went into a different method. Can I just do count ID from, and then without moving it? Oh, I see. Sometimes the compiler is strict. Yeah, okay. So I was able to clone it, send it over into this method, and it's happy again. So here's the value moved. So let's just do that. So we're transferring the near. So we are again getting the account. So the attached deposit is over here. So there's our attached deposit. And hopefully it will let me compare. Okay, so like I guess we can run our test again. So what we're trying to do is make sure that if you have a native account, we can attach the funds and basically send it over. It looks like we are failing. Attempt to multiply with the overflow. What? Near amount. So where is this coming from? We are okay. I'm just going to comment out all of this just to make sure that we're actually getting past the first util. Okay, so we are getting past the first util. So it looks like I think I want to see that. Oh, what is the balance? I'm curious. Print ln. All right, let's see. All right, it looks like I will need to panic to see the actual value. So let me just do that. Okay. So it says the balance is so and so. Okay. What we can do is we can also have another method, which is Yocto to near, but it looks like we're storing everything in Yocto, which is sorry folks, I was just typing the whole time without sharing my screen. Basically I just implemented this test and just trying to figure out what the issue is with the deposit. So I'm just trying to understand if the deposit comes in as near. Let's take a look at the deposit. So if you take this example, right, we have there's no deposit value, but it's in near. What I'm trying to figure out is if the attached deposit is coming in as near, or if it's coming in as Yocto, and I have a feeling that it's coming in as Yocto because the value is not a float, it's U128. So I think this is fine for us to store the deposit in the okay, so I spent a lot of time just kind of looking and scrolling around. So whatever, you can just summarize what I was trying to look at. So it's true in every transaction. These are all the environment variables that exist, and I was trying to figure out whether the attached deposit is Yocto or if it's near. I couldn't figure it out, but it looks like it's coming in as balance, which means it has to be a number without any decimals, so it has to be Yocto. Yocto is like the smallest denomination, right? So in near, so it's safe for us to convert it from from near into Yocto, which we did over here. This is 1 near into Yocto and divided by 10, so you get 0.1. And then it's safe for us to use that value throughout. That's what we did in the transfer near, because the attached deposit is in Yocto, and then we can increment it and then we can save it. So one thing we haven't done here is implement the other tests, so we're going to go ahead and implement this one. Okay, what a big name. So back to the test here. We are going to store, we're just going to create a guest, and we're going to call the transfer contract twice. The first time it should be okay. It will allow us to retrieve our near after first deposit, and then we want to do the same thing again, transfer near another time, near after second deposit. So what we're trying to do is we want to have 0.1 near, right? So divided by 100, and we'll have 60. So what we're doing is we're transferring 0.06 near the first time, and then the second time if you try to transfer 0.06 near, it'll be greater than 0.1 near, so it's just going to fail that transaction. So I believe we have to have test and then should panic is the other. So this second transfer should panic. Alright, then what we're going to do is assert that near after first deposit is the same as the attached deposit. And then just put an error message if that's the case. Alright, looks like it doesn't like us. Sorry, we can't copy it, so we have to clone it. Okay. So should not allow transferring. Okay, so let's go ahead and run this test. So we have a failed test, and that is should not allow transferring more than so and so minimum near to the guest account. Okay, so why don't we see what minimum near actually is? I had it printed here somewhere. Yeah, there you go. I'm going to copy it. And that is the minimum near. So what we'll do is transfer near if the new balance, if new if it is less than the new balance, we can panic and say cannot deposit more than near. Guest account. And I want to have that. So let's run the test again. All right, cool. So we can't deposit more than 0.1 near in the guest account. So let's send near from the guest account to the guest account, to another guest account. So function I guess I'm just going to call it transfer near between two guest accounts. None of the well, I guess you can copy the arrange portion, and then just make sure that we have guest 1 and then guest 2 okay. Have guest 1 and Bob. Guest 1 gets added, and then we can also add the second guest. It's fine for the public key to be repeated because we are not really testing for that. So yeah, just give me 1 second. Okay. All right. So at this point we have 2 guest accounts, and we want to make sure that Alice has enough funds. So what we'll do is we'll say contract dot accounts dot get guest 1 unwrap. Oh, that's not what we want to do. We want to actually insert that's fine. 0.06 near is fine. That's not the attached deposit, so we don't really need an attached deposit for this. That's the guest 1 balance. And we would like to store the values, and then we can act, which is contract dot transfer near for guest so transfer near is from native account to the guest account from guest. Transfer near between guests. Guest 1, guest 2, and then near to transfer, and that is guest 1 balance dot divided by 2. So basically half of this reduced to near to transfer. So even if you try to transfer a small fund, this smart contract will have to basically all the near for the guests is stored on this contract. So if you're transferring funds between two guest accounts, the contract has to spend the gas. So the amount that ends up going from the contract, so what we want to do is we want to, instead of sending the exact amount of near from one account to the next, we want to actually deduct the gas fee, because that's paid by the contract, and we don't want the contract to be losing funds over a period of time, because you'll be losing funds from other accounts. Even though it's 0.1 near, it's still important to be a little bit careful about that. So let's take a quick look at the context to see it's the prepaid gas, right? What we want to do is first so it basically returns the balance that was transferred, but before we do that, we want the gas spend the used gas sorry about that. I might be coming in with a little cold or something, so I'm not able to concentrate. I ended up putting my screen on mute and started coding away a bunch of stuff. I'm just going to go back real quick to the test that I was about to add. Basically, it's a transfer between the two guest accounts. And then we basically add the first guest, which is Alice, then Bob. Alice will be seated 0.06 near, and then we want to transfer half of that between the accounts. However, anytime you all the funds are held within the guest smart contract. So if you send funds between each other, you're still going to be spending a tiny amount of gas. And what we want to do is we want to deduct the gas that we spent as a result of this transaction, and basically withhold that funds on the smart contract. So that's guest 1, guest 2, and then the near to transfer, right? So the last one is the amount is from the balance. So obviously first test really want to make sure that want to assert that self is calling this. And we want to do that for not for the transfer near, but for add guest. Oh, I guess that is this one. Amount to transfer is the amount minus subtract the gas and subtract the gas and so that's the amount to transfer. So we want to make sure that we subtract this amount from the first guess, but the amount to transfer has to account for the gas that was already spent. So let's do this. Let's get the balance for the guest account, and then the new balance is going to be checked subtract the amount. So if you don't have enough funds, this amount is basically, it's going to if an overflow occurs, it should unable to transfer funds. It should throw the error message unable to transfer funds, and that's basically the new balance of the guest account. And what we will do is we'll say insert that into the guest account, new balance, that's fine. And then amount to transfer is what we will end up returning in the end, but not before we set the new guest to guest ID. Gets the amount to transfer. That's pretty much it. But before we do both, we want to make sure that both the guests exist on this account. So if self.account dot contains key from guest ID, it doesn't contain key, or basically the same test for the to guest account ID. We want to panic account does not exist. Yeah, okay. We could be a little bit nicer about this, and but I don't really care right now. Both accounts have to exist before us to get into this transfer method. So let's go back to our test. So we want to transfer the funds between the two accounts, sorry, and then transfer an amount. The assumption is transfer amount has to be less than the amount that you wanted to transfer. So because the gas is being deducted. Okay. Failed on unwrap on line guest account already added. Let's see. Add guest. Add guest. Oh, okay, fine. So it looks like it does matter that the public key is okay, so public key has to be different. So let's just do that. For public key 1 and then public key 2, that's just going to be, so C is just going to be 0. So public key 1, so let's just try to run the test again. Okay. Transfer near between two guest accounts has failed because it was unable to handle the invalid character on 128. Man. Z. Okay, so I'm just gonna grab another valid guest public key. So let's do that. Just wasn't happy with my editing skills. Okay, cool. So it looks like it was able to transfer. So, and the transferred amount is less. That's the first one, and we want to also check now that the let what is this? Guest one, Alice, right? Alice funds get account near. Guest one has to be the same as a near to transfer. And I think I need to own it. Because I think we're I see, so we moved it over there, so we can just do clone. Doesn't require cloning here, so let's run the test again. Okay, so we want to do the same test, but for amounts that Alice doesn't have. So the near to transfer is over here. What we want to do is we want to transfer one near, sorry, 0.1 near. Should fail transfer between guest accounts, should fail if not enough near in sender. Cool. It looks like this method should actually panic, so there's no need for us to write the rest of this, and we can just add the flag should panic. Where is it? Should panic in here, and then we don't need this as well. So the reason why it will panic is because it didn't panic. Okay, so I'm curious. The reason why it didn't panic. Transfer near between guests. It's the balance. The amount to transfer is sub. Yes. Checked sub. I'm able to transfer once. There we go. Did not panic. Transfer between guest accounts should fail if not enough near in the sender. So it appears to me amount to transfer balance. Shoot. All right. How do I log using this? Right. String from, and we want to format the string so that we have the new balance for this account. And this has to be set as bytes. Okay, so I'd like to see if I can log the message now. 185 tests. Failures, did not panic as expected. So I wonder why cargo print doesn't work. It's no capture. Okay, let's try that. Connected cannot, has it? Okay, so what if we try println? Okay, so the new balance is amount checked sub. Yeah, let's see. Okay, so I'm curious now for sure what's going on. Balance. Right, we want the amount, and we want the new balance. Hopefully, I think I want to just run a single test. I'm commenting out everything except for the last one, which is failing right now. So let's just run this. All right, what do we get here? So we have the balance for the amount, and then we have the new balance. So let's copy this. That's the balance. That's the amount. Ah, yes, so I made a mistake over here in do that. Right. 6 divided by 10, 19, 11. Okay, so that should actually, so at this point we know for a fact that it's definitely less than what we're trying to transfer, so it failed. Panicked, I'm unable to transfer funds right here. Ah, perfect, there we go. So we're using the built-in method of figuring out if there's an overflow. Cool. So we're going to uncommon all of these. We have the tests passing so far. So the last thing here is that we want to be able to send near from the guest account to the native account, and it works basically the same way. We just have to call question is, do we want that? I guess it does. I mean, at some point, if you got near sent to you, you can always send it back. However, you won't be able to send back the entire amount, but the options should still be there. So let's write the test. Trying to figure out which of these methods I can copy over. Sorry, which of these, which of these methods I can copy over. I think maybe I'll copy over this one. Guest, so should send near from guest account to the native account. That's the code from the test, and that's fine. We have, and this is fine, we're just transferring half the balance just to make sure that the test actually passes. So this is not a guest. It's just going to be blob.testnet, and this is near account view, and we don't need to create that second public key, so we have only the first guest inserted into the accounts. Transfer here from guest, and then we have the guest name, near account ID, and the near to transfer. The transferred amount is always going to be less than the near to transfer. Yeah, okay. So for this, we have to take a look at the near SDK. Rest. So we want to be able to transfer funds. So actually, let's go to the documentation page. Cross contract. Transfer. Simple transfer. Yeah, maybe that we can try that. Simple transfer. Send tokens. There we go. That's the method I'm looking for. Oh, it's looking like it's giving me the JavaScript version. Just curious. SDK. Send. Transfer. All right, so let's go ahead and create our method. And that is coming from, it's basically the same thing. To account ID is what we want. To account ID. Pretty much everything else is the same here. We want to make sure that the account contains the guest account exists, and we want to figure out that new balance. We want to set that new balance as well. Maybe we can refactor this. We'll put that up here as well. So there must be a way for us to come back in the future and then refactor it. So that would be over here. Even the amount transfer, I'm sure, can be refactored. So I just put that again. Factor, possibly. And then what we want to do is say transfer. No, we don't want to do transfer here. Account ID from, where's it account? Let me see. So near account. What else is here? Oops. I'm just curious if I can get the current account ID. Sure. Maybe I can use the environment methods. Okay. We have to get into some Google searches here. Rust, near transfer, fun on the smart contract. So what do we have here? Ah, interesting. Okay, so let's try that. Promise new, and then the account ID, which is inv dot the predecessor account ID dot send transfer, the amount to transfer, however, I think that promises. Promise. Okay, I have to look up another example that I did recently. regarding promises. So what we want to do is try to make this transfer, right? However, because this is a promise, we want to set up another promise here. Callback is, so it's a new promise on the account ID. And then what we want to do is a function call on this account ID that is so what we want to do is we don't want to change the balance now. Instead, it's the amount to transfer that needs to come back. So that is decrease guest on transfer completed is a method that we want to call to vec, and it's going to take in some arguments. The cool thing is we can pass in our arguments in JSON format, and that is amount to square amount transferred it's going to pass in the amount transfer, and then we're not passing in any amount to this call, and we are just yeah, we need to attach some gas here, so let's do that. We'll just attach maybe a small amount of gas. We may come back and refactor this gas call, but so we do a function call. This is the callback. So transfer promise do a callback, which is then callback is what we want to do. So we won't be, yeah, so that's right. We haven't imported JSON, so let's do that. And we don't have an on transfer completed implemented, so we can do that as well. What's going on here? Right, because it has to be into the string dot into bytes. So we need a method here called on transfer completed, Amount transferred is balance, and that's it. So what will happen here is the amount to transfer. I'll find the balance. Well, it's important to check that your balance can support the actual fund being sent over. So, and then we can basically set amount transferred, and then we want to have a new balance. Over here. So amount transferred. We're setting our new balance, and then the guest ID. Oh, that's right. See, we also need from guest ID. It's an account ID. I guess we don't need the amount transferred, so we'll get rid of that, and instead it needs from guest ID. We're going to reset it to a new balance. However, before we do that, we still need to make sure that the promise has succeeded. So we still want to assert that this call has been made by the predecessor, which is the same person as the owner account ID. And then we want to make sure that we're matching the promise result and not ready, it's unreachable. Because in theory we either get promise failed or promise successful, so the second is promise failed. That is going to be logged as an error. Do we want to deduct the gas of the failed transaction? Maybe we want to deduct the gas of the failed transaction here, but that's okay. So for now we will just, if it's failed, we won't do anything. Otherwise, yeah, fill out the arm. So if it is successful, with the result, what we can do is update the balance, and then otherwise we can say env.log okay. We can say transaction failed. So, transfer near failed. Okay. So let's scroll back down and take a look at this. Okay, this is a promise. do return the promise, and the transferred amount is a promise, so context dot. Is there some way I can tell the promises to resolve? Guess not. Really? Well, I guess the only thing I can do is let this transaction happen, and then we can assert that as funds are guess one balance is greater than the current Alice funds. So I don't have a whole lot of hope on this method succeeding because it involves a bunch of promises, but we can just try it anyway and see if it helps. So okay, so it doesn't like unreachable. So instead I can just panic, not ready. And then try to run my test again. Oh, doesn't like this. We didn't import it. We don't need that either. We don't need this. We don't need these two. Okay, let's run a test again. It's probably going to fail. Yeah. Wow. Okay, I wonder where it failed. So let's just get rid of no capture. Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure what's the best way to test promises, so I'm going to just do a little search. Unit test. So how am I test? Near Rust unit test promise. Hopefully I'll find something there. Yeah, there we go. So he's testing that the contract so I'm just going to take a look. we find some hints in this code. It looks like we have to do something related to weight. It's coming from utils. Weight epoch. Oh, interesting. Yeah, I don't want to do that right now. I'm just going to comment it. I'm just going to try to test this in the next session with. So I'm just going to do what to do. That's going to have some hints here. Use. And then that's gone. It's kind of risky, but I haven't had it been sitting down here coding for about 2 hours. I'm going to take a break. Or maybe I can just disable this functionality if I'm not able to fully test it properly. That's also fine in my opinion. So we'll see. So in the next session, what I want to do is basically test this, continue to test being able to send near between the two guests. We'll basically try to create a testnet account and then send funds into the guest account, and then just do a bunch of transfers here and there between the guests. Yeah, once that's all said and done, we can go ahead for the NFT transfer between the users, whether it is, between the guests, guests or the mainnet account users or the testnet account users, and then it'll come back and do the same thing for the fungible token. So yeah, lots to come.